Hello everyone and welcome back to Great Broadway Fan's YouTube channel. I'm Luke and today I'm bringing you my full in-depth review of Fox's television movie remake of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Full disclosure, spoilers ahead. If you have not seen the original Rocky Horror film or have not seen this remake, there are going to be spoilers. And there are chapter times in the video description if you want to skip around to hear me talk about a specific part. And I have my notes here right on the side. All set to go. Okay. So, before we get started, I have to make a full disclosure before I get started proper with this video. I am not a huge die-hard fan of Rocky Horror. I did not grow up watching this movie. I had never seen this film until last year for the very first time. Yes, it was Halloween 2015, just last year, that I watched Rocky Horror for the very first time. And I have to say, I have great respect for this movie. I believe it is a beautiful time capsule of not only the cast, but the fandom that it later evolved into this cult classic. This movie is campy, this movie is goofy and ridiculous and raunchy and dirty and vulgar and sexual, and it's Rocky Horror. And, like I said, great respect for this movie and everybody involved with it. But, so when I heard that Fox had decided to choose Rocky Horror to remake as a follow-up to Grease Live, I was a little bit apprehensive about it because myself personally, not a huge fan, but the cast definitely intrigued me, and I thought, hey, another excuse to watch a musical on television. What could be more fun than that? But I need to talk about something before I go full in-depth with this video, and I need to talk about remakes. And there's been a lot of hate on the internet with the word remake. People have just been dragging that word through the mud because people are like, Hollywood's out of original ideas. They don't do anything anymore. They're so unoriginal. And here's the thing. Remakes, I fully welcome them. I have no problem with them. And I've watched a lot of good remakes lately. I personally, if you remember, if you follow my Great Movie Fan channel, myself and my friend Kayla were huge fans of the Ghostbusters remake that came out this summer. I have loved every single live-action Disney fairy tale that's been produced over the last 6 years, and half of them have been remakes. So, I think I've been able to pinpoint two major criterias that a remake has to hit. Number one, there needs to be a callback or an homage to the original film, whether that's through the art design, the costume design, the cinematography, the orchestrations. There needs to be a callback to the original. And then number two, it needs to be its own separate entity. There needs to be a reason for it to exist. It needs to stand on its own 2 feet. And sometimes remakes will either just be that, they'll be their own separate thing, like Ghostbusters, which was a wacky comedy with just women in the lead roles instead of men. Or if you look at the Disney live-action fairy tales with Maleficent, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, and now next year's Beauty and the Beast, they're expanding upon the existing story. It's a different story than the original. The problem with the Rocky Horror Picture Show on Fox is that there is not one shred of originality in this production. The text is verbatim from the original, and it is almost a near exact carbon copy with just a brand new cast and a new production team. That's literally what this is. It's not expanding upon any characters. It doesn't have a rewritten book. There's no new music that's been added. It is an exact textual copy from the original 1975 film, which is the biggest problem, and I think that was people's problem with this movie. So really, the only thing that I can do is just compare the original to the remake because it's not a different story. It's the same story with just a different cast and a different production team. So I'm going to go in order. of the cast in order of the billing, but I'm going to start with Kenny Ortega first. And, you know, people give him a lot of crap. I feel bad for Kenny Ortega. He has produced some stuff that is questionable, I'm not going to lie, but when I was younger, I was a huge fan of the High School Musical franchise, and I thought that Descendants was pretty less than subpar. But Kenny Ortega, I have my notes here. He's a very good director. He's not great, but he's good, and he handled the material the best that he could. Rocky Horror is an R-rated musical, and he made it TV-14 for television, and I think that he recognized the camp factor and worked that well into this TV movie. It wasn't perfect, but he did a good job, and I don't like it when people drag Kenny through the gutter, because he has done good work in the past. And I don't know. I've always been a fan of his work. So now let's go through the cast in order of billing, not in order of best to worst or worst to best, but in order of the billing from top to bottom. So starting with Laverne Cox as Dr. Frankenfurter. I can't even imagine what it must be like stepping into a role like this, so famously originated by Tim Curry, and I think that she did the best that she could with the part that she was given. You can tell by her performance that she was having the time of her life, and that she was just going full out for it. There were moments in her performance that were great, but a lot of the time, she looked really uncomfortable in the part that she was given. Her singing and her character voice was perfectly on point. It was deep enough to match this character that is Dr. Frankenfurter. But some of the mannerisms that she did were, I found, like they were very awkward and clunky when I saw them on screen. Tim Curry's performance, he doesn't play the role overtly feminine. He just plays it masculine, normal, just with no leaning one side over the other. He just walks this fine line of being neutral with his character choices, and it's not overtly feminine or overtly masculine. It's just a neutral, weird character. Laverne played all of her mannerisms up for feminine qualities. It was the way that she pranced around in the costumes, and the way she'd move her hands and her lips and her face. Like I said, she did a very good job, but there were just moments about the performance here and there that were just a little bit questionable. And like I said, good job in some areas, not so good job in other areas. And also, I just think that her costumes, although beautifully designed by William Ivey Long, and I'll get to him later in this video, some of the costumes worked so well for her, and then other costumes just did not. Like, there were some costumes that just, I don't know if it was the wrong wig or if it was the wrong cut of the costume, but some costumes just didn't look good on her, but others did. So, mixed emotions with her performance. Next up, we have Victoria Justice as Janet Weiss. She was perfect. I think that Victoria completely got the goofy, silly, camp wonderfulness about Janet's performance. Janet is the kind of character that goes from being this innocent ingenue to being this sexually awakened woman, and Victoria played it perfectly. Her screaming was perfect, her character voice was so cute, and her singing voice, although I will say I was very upset that there was not live vocals on set while they filmed it. They obviously pre-recorded it in a studio, and I know that Victoria's voice is better than what was presented. You don't need to auto-tune Victoria Justice. She can sing. She really, really can. Next up, we have Ryan McCartan as Brad Majors, and he also, like Victoria, did a great job. He fully got the campness of Brad's character. He goes from being this straight-laced character who's very prim and proper with his bow tie and everything and his glasses to being this loose, once again, sexually awakened character. And, I mean, it was so funny to see him in that final floor show sequence. It was absolutely hysterical. He just commanded the stage, and he was crazy in his costume and the dancing. It was just, his performance was really, really good. I love both of the chemistry between Victoria and Ryan were really, really spot on perfect. Next up, Annaleigh Ashford as Columbia. Perfect casting, perfect role for her. I loved her New Jersey accent. She was so wacky and kooky. She's a great character actress. She really becomes the character, and I love that about Annaleigh Ashford. I've seen her in Legally Blonde, Wicked, and she's so fantastic as Columbia. Really, really owns this character, and just whenever she's on screen, you can't take your eyes off of her. She's so fantastic. Next up is Adam Lambert. He had one song, which was Hot Patootie, and he killed his performance. Absolutely fantastic. Great vocals, great performance, and that's really the only thing that he does, and he did a great job with it. Next up, Reeve Carney as Riff Raff. I felt like he was the weakest of the cast. He's a very good singer, but he was the most unoriginal with his character. It wasn't literally almost an exact copy of what Richard O'Brien did in the original film, from the way that he moved his mouth so slowly like this. Like, he didn't bring anything new to the character, and that was really disappointing, because I love Reeve Carney. He's a great performer. He's been on Broadway. I'm always a huge fan when I get to see Broadway talent in movies or on television, and it was disappointing to see him not bring anything new to this character. Christina Milian. I've never heard of this woman before when she got cast as Magenta, so I had no precedent going in whatsoever. I knew through Google that she was the one who sang the Kim Possible theme song, so that was like, oh, it's this person, but I had never heard of her before, never seen her in anything, and I thought that she was very good. I loved her character voice and her accent. That was really, really good. I just felt like she didn't have enough screen time to do anything really innovative with her performance. Like Reeve Carney, it felt very unoriginal. It felt very based off of the original movie, and I would have loved to have seen more from her performance. But good chemistry with Reeve Carney, though. Next up, we have Staz Nair as Rocky, and I mean, just perfect. He looked the part, he acted the part well, his childish, like, robotic Frankenstein mannerisms were hilarious. His singing voice is very good, and I thought that his childishness of how he basically has the mind of like a 4-year-old, but is this huge, like, perfect specimen of a man is just, it was hysterical. His performance was just so perfect, just pitch perfect, amazing. Ivy Levan, I think it's Ivy Levan. She plays the usherette at the very beginning of the movie who sings science fiction double feature. And instead of like the original movie where it's just lips that are singing to you, she actually is a character that introduces you and brings you into the movie house. And she killed it. Her vocals are amazing. The riffs that she would do in her performance was spot on. She looked gorgeous in her costume, and she was just oozing perfection. I absolutely adored her. Next up, we have Tony Award winner Ben Vereen as Dr. Scott. He was very, very funny. A little corny with his performance. I really am not a fan of the song, When Eddie Said He Didn't Like His Teddy. I think that that's just such a boring, unnecessary song that it really doesn't need to be in this movie. It adds nothing to the plot. I would say that half of the songs in Rocky Horror don't add anything to the plot. But Ben Vereen did a fantastic job. I loved his wig. I loved his automatic powered wheelchair. It was just perfect. And his, like, brutish character voice was just absolutely fantastic. And then finally, we have Tim Curry as the narrator. Coming back to Rocky Horror, he originated the character of Dr. Frankenfurter in London, then on Broadway, then immortalized it on film. And he was a trooper coming back to the material like this. I mean, it was so fantastic. I know that he's had some health problems, but it was so incredible to see him back in this material and there to do this amazing cameo. He came in and he did it. He killed it. 3 more things before we wrap this up. The framing device of having this TV movie take place in a movie house, which is reminiscent of the midnight showings audiences who would yell things back at the screen, and they would interact. They would use the newspapers and the party hats and throw the toilet paper. I felt that it was really cheap. I felt that it was too cheap, and it was one of those just intentional winks to the camera like, see, we're calling back to the craziness of Rocky Horror. See what we're doing now? And that was, I think, the biggest problem with this movie, is that there were too many in-jokes. There were too many intentional winks to the camera with this material. I think that it honestly should have been a live studio audience. If Rocky Horror had been done live, with a live studio audience who either had never seen it before or had known Rocky Horror. I like how, because Fox was the one that changed it with live musicals. They did Grease live in front of a live studio audience. That's nothing that NBC had done, and yet they decided to make this a pre-recorded TV movie, and I honestly didn't think that it worked. I think it would have been a lot better. I think it would have been a lot more enjoyable if it had been a live studio audience that had been shouting things at the characters, and I think that it's just a missed opportunity. The production design, gorgeous. The castle is fantastic. The movie house looked beautiful. The laboratory was my favorite scene, like set piece. The laboratory was my favorite set piece in the whole thing. And you can tell, because there was so much more money that they had, they could put more into the costumes and the production design and the actual set that they were working with. And speaking of costumes, multiple Tony Award winner William Ivey Long designing the costumes for this. And I decided to do my top 5 favorite costumes that were in this event. Number 5 was Magenta's maid outfit. I loved her wig. I loved that little like streak in her hair that she did. I just loved how simple the maid costume looked, but how sexy it looked. It was really, really good. Number 4 was Columbia's groupie costume with her big fluffy skirt, tutu, whatever you want to call it. She and her pink hair with like the sassy cut was really, really sharp and on point. Annaleigh Ashford looked great in that costume. Number 3 was Ivy Levan's usherette costume. I thought it was perfect. I thought it looked like it was set in the 1950s. Perfect time era for these science fiction movies and everything. She looked fantastic. Number 2 was the red costume that Laverne wore as Dr. Frankenfurter. I thought that was the best with the wig. The wig was sharp and came to a point. And the red costume, especially with the mesh long jacket that was worn over it, that was really good. And finally, my favorite costume was actually Janet's gold outfit with the black boa in the floor show at the very end of the movie. So overall, I would give the Rocky Horror Picture Show Let's Do the Time Warp Again a B- C+ average. It is a mad, insane, bloody, fun, goofy, campy comedy romp that you really can't take all that seriously. And if you are not a fan of this, then we always have the original film that is forever preserved until the end of time. So, that is my review of the Rocky Horror Picture Show event. Let's Do the Time Warp Again. Thank you so much for watching this. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you are not already subscribed. You can follow me on my Instagram, @GreatBroadwayFan, my Twitter, @GreatBWayFan. Please go subscribe to my Great Movie Fan channel as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.